Today, I picked the story to read from American literature as practicing English for second language. Let's start. The Student by Anton Chekhov. I don't know the last name. At first, the weather was fine and still. The thrushes were calling, and in the swamps close by something alive, drawn pitifully with a sound like blowing into an empty bottle. A snipe flew by, and the shot aimed at it rang out with a gay, resounding note in the spring air. But when it began to get dark in the forest, a cold, penetrating wind blew inappropriately from the east, and everything sank into silence. Needles of ice stretched across the poles, and it felt cheerless, remote, and lonely in the forest. There was a fifth of winter. Okay, before I continue, there are many vocabularies. I have no idea what are the meanings, the definition of them, that's it, and how pronounce. Anyway, continue reading. Ivan Velikovsky, this is the name of person, the sons of a sacristan and a student of the clerical academy, returning home from shooting, kept walking on the path by the waterlogged meadows. His fingers were numb, and his face was burning with the wind. It seemed to him that the cold that had suddenly come on had destroyed the order and harmony of things, that nature itself felt ill at ease, and that was why the evening darkness was falling more rapidly than usual. All round it was deserted and peculiarly gloomy. The early light was one gleaming in the windows, gardens near the river, the village over there miles away, and everything in the distance all round was plunged in the cold evening mist. The student remembered that, as he had left the house, his mother was sitting barefoot on the floor on the entryway, cleaning the small fire, while his father lay on the stove coughing, as it was Good Friday. Nothing had been cooked, and the student was terribly hungry. And now, shrinking from the cold, he thought that just such a wind had blown in the days of Rulik, and in the time of Ivan the Terrible and Peter. And in that time there had been just the same desperate poverty and hunger, the same that the same thatched roofs with holes in them, ignorance, misery, the same desolation around, the same darkness, the same feelings of oppression. All this has existed, this exists, and would exist, and the lapse of 1,000 years would make life no better. And he did not want to go home. The sound upset. The gardens were called the widows. The widows? Not windows, sorry, not window, widows, okay? The gardens were called the widows because they were kept by two widows, mother and daughter. A campfire was burning brightly with a cracking sound, drawing out light far around on the parched earth. There are many vocabulary that I have no idea how to read them and the definition of them. The widow Vasilisa, a tall, fat old woman in a man's coat, was standing by and looking thoughtfully into the fire. Her daughter Lugia, a little pockmarked woman with a stupid-looking face, was sitting on the ground, watching a currant and spoons. Apparently they had just had supper. There was a sound of men's voices. It was the laborers watering their horses at the river. "Here you have window back again," said the student. Oh, sorry, I lost the sound of the people. Okay, anyway, just let's go. Like I feel like to to make. Okay, let's say it again. The student's voice should be young, right? "Here you have window back again," said the student, going up to the campfire. "Good evening." Vassilisa started, but at once recognized him and smiled cordially. "I did not know you. God bless you," she said. "You brilliant." They talked. Vasila, a woman of experience who had been in service with the gentry, first as a wet nurse, afterwards as a children's nurse, expressed herself with refinement and a soft, sedated smile never left her face. Her daughter, Lucia, a village peasant woman who had been beaten by her husband, simply screwed up her eyes at the student and said nothing, and she had a strange expression like that of a deaf mute. At just such a fire, the Apostle Peter warmed himself, said the student, stretching out his hands to the fire. "So it must have been cold then too. Oh, what a terrible night it must have been, Granny. An utterly dismal, long night." He looked round at the darkness, shook his head abruptly, and asked, "No doubt you have heard the reading of the 12 Apostles?" "Yes, I have," answered Vassilisa. "If you remember at the Last Supper, Peter said to Jesus, 'I am ready to go with thee into darkness and unto death.' And our Lord answered him thus, 'I say unto thee, Peter, before the cock crows thou wilt have denied me thrice.'" Oh my gosh. I don't know how to pronounce those words at all. After the supper, Jesus went through the agony of death in the garden and prayed. And poor Peter was weary in spirits and faint. His eyelids were heavy, and he could not struggle against sleep. He fell asleep. Then you heard how Judas the same night kissed Jesus and betrayed him to his tormentors. They took him bound to the high priest and beat him, while Peter, exhausted, worn out with misery and alarm, hardly awake, feeling that something awful was just going to happen on earth, followed behind. He loved Jesus passionately, intensely, and now he saw from far off how he was beaten. Lucia left the spoons and fixed an immobile stare upon the student. "They came to the high priest," he went on. "They began to question Jesus, and meantime the laborers made a fire in the yards, as it was called, and warmed themselves. Peter, too, stood with them near the fire and warmed himself as I am doing." A woman seeing him said, "He was with Jesus too." That is as much as to say that he too should be taken to be questioned, and all the laborers that were standing near the fire must have looked sourly and suspiciously at him, because he was confused and said, "I don't know him." A little while after, again someone recognized him as one of Jesus' disciples and said, "Thou too art one of them." But again he denied it. And for the third time someone turned to him, "Why, did I not see thee with him in the garden today?" For the third time he denied it. And immediately after that time he crowed, and Peter, looking from afar off at Jesus, remembered the words he had said to him in the evening. He remembered he came into himself, went out of the yard, and wept bitterly, bitterly. In the Gospel it is written, he went out and wept bitterly. I imagine it, the still, dark garden, and in the stillness, faintly audible, smoother sobbing. The student sighed and sank into thought. Still smiling, Vasilisa suddenly gave a gulp. Big tears flowed freely down her cheeks, and she screened her face from the fire with her sleeve as though ashamed of her tears. And Lugaya, staring immobilely at the student, flushed crimson, and her expression became strained and heavy like that of someone enduring intense pain. The laborers came back from the river, and one of them riding a horse was quite near, and the light from the fire quivered upon him. The student said good night to the widows and went on. And again the darkness was about him, and his fingers began to be numb. A cool wind was blowing. Winter really had come back, and it did not feel as though Easter would be the day after tomorrow. Now the student was thinking about Vasilisa. Since she had shed tears, all that had happened to Peter the night before the crucifixion must have some relation to her. He looked round. The solitary light was still gleaming in the darkness, and no figures could be seen near now. The student thought again that if Vasilisa had shed tears, and her daughter had been troubled, it was evident that what he had just been telling them about, which had happened 19 centuries ago, had a relation to the present, to both women, to the desolate village, to himself, to all people. The old woman had wept, not because he could tell the story touchingly, but because Peter was near to her, because her whole being was interested in what was passing in Peter's soul. And joy suddenly stirred in his soul, and he even stopped for a minute to take breath. The past, he thought, is linked with the present by an unbroken chain of events flowing one out of another, and it seemed to him that he had just seen both ends of that chain, and when he touched one end, the other quivered. When he crossed the river by the ferry boat, and afterwards, mounting the hill, looked at his village and towards the west, where the cold crimson sunset lay a narrow stake of light. He thought that truth and beauty which has guided human life, that in the garden and in the yard of the high priest, had continued without interruption to this day, and had evidently always been the chief thing in human life and in all earthly life, indeed, and the feeling of youth, health, vigor. He was only 22, and the inexpressible sweet expectation of happiness, of unknown mysterious happiness, took possessions of him little by little, and life seemed to him enchanting, marvelous, and full of lofty meaning. The end. There are many vocabularies that I have no idea, and a little bit confusing to make the sounds for character, but it is good story. I'm not quite sure by my understanding of many vocabulary I don't know about the end of story seem to be happy But the story in the middle, while the student told the widow about the story sad one, Jesus and Peter, some kind like that. Anyway, if you learned and you know this story, you can discuss and tell me what you think or what you learn in the comment, okay? Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.